Well, hi again. This is the sixth in the series of recordings on building something for your maths faculty on Teams and SharePoint. And today we come to an interesting one, which is for purchase requests. Most New South Wales government schools now have at least one purchasing card, or the otherwise more generically known as a government credit card. Some schools have one, some schools have more. Um, some schools actually give one to every one of their faculty heads, which can be convenient, but still, not everyone has one. And so, quite often, you might actually end up with some faculty members who might need to buy something, but they've sort of got to ask you, and then you've got to remember. And it's not the problem of asking, it's actually faculty heads remembering to buy it. And then what happens if you need to then ask the office to go and purchase something for you? And this list tries to get around some of those problems. And of course, the existing processes there are probably paper-based. And so one of the other struggles is remembering which is your general ledger code to enter. Um, these SharePoint lists can actually help us. So let's see how we actually might use an existing one. And this is one on the Norman Hurst Boys High School staff intranet. So if I wanted to make a request from the mathematics department, so for example, I'll click the new button there on the list. The status is requested, and obviously there are other statuses there that allows me to see exactly where the purchase request process is up to, who I need this to be purchased by. So if it's a sufficiently small item, then the local KLA head teacher or the cost center manager can purchase it. Um, they may have a smaller P card credit limit, or if you need to purchase something bigger, such as a set of textbooks, which costs in excess of $5,000, for example, you might have to go and request it from the office. But if you then request it from the office, you might need an extra layer of approval from the KLA head teacher. And then you can go and enter some supplier details. So there's some pre-populated ones, but this is a choice column, which allows you to basically just type anything in. So apart from these pre-populated ones, there are other ones that you can use. But let's just choose this supplier, for example. What's the item name? Say for example, whiteboard markers. And you might actually go and paste a URL as to where that particular item is. More often than not these days, there's probably a URL that you can go and paste in. So let's just enter a fictitious one, which isn't really going to take you to a product specifically, but obviously you'll try and go and grab the URL from the browser address bar where possible. And the unit price is, for example, $12 each. Is it GST inclusive? Some websites display GST inclusive. Some websites, especially the department supply ones, might display a GST exclusive unit price. So let's say, for example, we do GST exclusive here, and we might need to purchase 6 of these with a delivery cost of $6. So does the GST does the delivery cost include GST as well? So there's also an option to tick that. And the next part is the interesting bit. How do we then get the cost center up? So quite often with the system that we have, there's a whole stack of cost centers, and it's actually impractical to enter these into the SharePoint choice column. So what we're going to see today is a SharePoint manage metadata column type, which actually allows you to click this little tag button open, and it gives you some very nice little tags here that you could use. So if you happen to remember it, you can still type it in. So 682, start typing it in, and then suddenly you can actually have a drop down there. So for example, you can do it here as well. Type in 6, and then you know, it's mathematics. And again, similarly with the ledger code, again, really no one can practically remember these off the top of their heads. So the manage metadata column allows you to actually pop these open, and it's a teaching resource. This thing here is a budgeted item, so we'll leave that ticked. And then you've got some automatically populated fields, and all the requester needs to do is to fill out all those important details, which is not a lot, to be honest. All this stuff up here, up to accounting details, and then hit that save button either up the top or down the bottom. And here you see the whiteboard markers. And you'll notice that these columns here are automatically calculated as well. So you've also got some very nice um, uh, uh, calculator columns in SharePoint to help you out as well. And of course, there is actually a flow behind the scenes to inform the appropriate people that something new has gone in. So we'll quickly just drag a Teams window across and have a quick look in a minute. And lo and behold, the approval has come. So one of my faculty members, who happens to be myself, has sent me a request to buy something via the office. So there is a little approval card that pops up here. I can quickly go and check it out by simply clicking on this link or one of these links here. It'll take me straight to the item, load it all up so I can actually have a quick look at it. And it looks like it's all good. And if I click on this little URL there, it'll take me to the appropriate website, for example. So what I should go back and do is, yes, let's approve it. And let's just check the chat as well. And as we await for the approval to come through, here it is. I've now gotten an approval granted that has been sent to the person who created the request. And because it's purchased via the office, it's a large purchase request. And obviously, usually you do it for a larger grand total than just 85.20. But of course, this is now sent to the person who actually needs to help make that purchase. And in this situation, our colleague Anne, who's a SAS staff member, they can actually help with that one. And so as we head back into this list, you'll notice that these statuses are automatically updated. And now that approval has been granted and our colleague Anne has gone to purchase it for us, she then goes and clicks a button as she finishes making that purchase over here. And of course, that now pops up. And the status has been purchased. Double click on it and this little tick comes up. And then as that item is now received, the person who has requested that can receive the item, click that, that will appear, and the purchase is now completed. And so this is the entire process, and of course the status is received, and you'll notice of course also the status updates field is also updated as we go along. And finally, just so that this item just disappears from view, we can then untick the visible box, and that will make the item disappear from view. Not that it's deleted, because we'll be using some SharePoint views to actually hide it. So let's see how we can go and build this thing from scratch. So the first thing you'll need here is, of course, a new empty list. So in fact, let's go to our testing mathematics faculty group and actually go and create a new list. And it's a blank list, and we'll call this thing here purchase requests TMFG. And we'll show this in the site navigation as well. This title column, I'm going to rename it to item name. And now I'm going to actually go and create a few other columns that are based on what's there in the existing columns as well. So let's actually go and create a new single line of text called URL. So you'll need a URL, or at least you'll want a URL there. And we will now go and create a new column called unit price. So this time it's actually going to be a currency column. Unit price, and it's currency, automatic, and we want 1,000 separator, and of course the minimum of allowed value is 0. And we will require that this, actually let's have a look at whether we require this column has information. I think we do. Yes, we will. Okay, and the minimum allowed value is in fact 0.01. So the minimum allowed value there is 1 cent. Let's head back and keep going. Let's go and do a new column called GST inclusive unit price. So it's a yes, no type column, GST, inclusive unit price. And it's a yes, no column. By default, it is yes, and we will require that it has information. The next one is going to be the quantity. So this time it's a number, and we don't want any decimal places because it's actually just a um, integer. We want it to be by default have 1, and then we will use thousand separator, and the minimum allowed value is 1. I'm not going to set a maximum there, and I think we will need also a requirement there. Let's save that. And what else is there? Let's head over to do some calculate. No, in fact, let's do a couple of other cost type columns. So we do have delivery cost. Again, this one is a currency type column. And automatic minimum value is 0. So we don't want people putting in -1 there, for example. And let's see if this one requires any information. I think it does. Yep. And the next one, let's have a quick look. And I think that this next one is going to be the GST inclusive delivery cost. So it's another yes, no type. And the default is yes, and we will require that this has information. So now what we'll do is we'll now go and create a few calculated columns based on what's been entered. So we now want a calculated column, and I think let's click on more there. And here you have a calculated column. This column name is now going to be XGST cost. Let's make that capitals there. And what's this XGST cost going to be? Well, it's going to end up as a currency type column. And here you can actually start to build a formula. And so what sort of formula do we want? Let me just paste this description in first. We want to have an Excel-like formula that says if, right? And it's if the GST inclusive unit price is equal to 1, that is, basically, if you just leave that there, if it's 0, then it'll ignore it. It'll be a false. So over here, if there is a GST inclusive unit price ticked, then what we want is the unit price divided by 11, but then multiplied by 10. So that's the GST inclusive unit cost. And of course, we then need to multiply that by the quantity. Otherwise, put a comma there, we just simply want the unit price multiplied by the quantity. And we're just going to close that off and click OK. So the next column that we want is the XGST delivery. So we've got a unit price and the XGST total. We now need another more column. And this time it's calculated again, and it's actually called XGST delivery. And here it's actually calculated. And again, here I'm just going to quickly paste this formula in. It's basically if the GST inclusive delivery cost column is ticked, then the delivery cost divided by 11 times 10 is what's going to go into this column. Otherwise, it's just going to be the delivery cost. And it's a currency column. And let's hit that OK there. And there are a couple of other little calculation columns there. Let's do a GST for the item and a GST for the delivery. So let's just do this first. And this one is the actual GST cost for the item. Let's try and do it over here. GST item and default there. And yes, we can actually use a calculated value here. So again, basically it's if the GST inclusive price is ticked, then it's basically just the unit price divided by 11 times the quantity. Otherwise, it's the unit price divided by 10 times the quantity. And again, we don't need anything else ticked because this is one of those calculated columns. Looks like I might need to use oops, we'll need to go to calculated column. Looks like it can't be done in this modern interface here. Let's do the calculated value. Oh, if I paste that, it looks like I can't do it here. So let's just do it by ticking more. It's GST item, and it's a calculated column. Paste that in. It's currency again. Click OK. The next one is actually the GST on the delivery. So sometimes there's a GST cost on the delivery as well. So let's just keep going. And it's GST delivery calculated. Again, if the GST inclusive delivery cost is there, then it's just the delivery cost divided by 11. Otherwise, it's the delivery cost divided by 10 there. And you can use this to add it to the formula if you need to. It's a currency type column. And I think we are almost done. Let's do the final one, which is the grand total column. So we want to actually have a grand total there. We're just going to leave off the space for the time being. And then we'll stick the space back in. And it's another calculated column. This time, of course, the formula is a little bit different, and it's equals to. So what do we need to add up? We need to add up the XGST cost plus the XGST delivery plus the GST on the item plus the GST on the delivery. And I think that's it. So the currency is there. And so by pulling all these columns together, irrespective of what is entered here in the some of the other columns there, so delivery cost and also the unit price, just by simply using a few tick boxes, you can actually easily calculate what's actually there. So it sort of behaves a little bit like Excel. Let's tick OK. And immediately you can just do a quick run of it. So testing. So unit price is 1, quantity is 1, delivery cost is 0. Is it GST inclusive? Save the column, save the thing, and the grand total is 1. The XGST cost is, of course, 91 cents. The GST on the item is, of course, just 9 cents, and it just adds up to 1, simply because we've actually ticked the GST inclusive unit price. But of course, if we then go and untick that, you'd expect the price to go up to $1.10. And here it is. GST on the item is there, and the grand total is $1.10. So that's the first couple of columns there. So we also then want to start to add a couple of other ones, such as the nominated purchaser, status updates, and a couple of other bits and pieces. So let's go ahead and do a person field called nominated purchaser, because this one could be someone in the office, or it could be your own KLA head teacher. We'll want to show a profile picture, but we don't need this populated yet, because it's going to depend on what is selected in one of the choice fields at the start. So we have nominated purchaser, and of course we now want to also have a to be purchased by. Almost forgot about this one. So our to be purchased by, and who are we allowing to purchase these things? Well, it's basically anyone who is authorized to purchase for your faculty, and so it might be your KLA head teacher, or it might be the office. So in fact, let's go and put office there. KLA head teacher, cost center manager. Let's just get rid of this one as well. And we will require that this has some information. And so because we've just created that column, it's not a bad idea to go and just, as a test, quickly select that as well, because down the track we're going to need that information. Let's actually go and create our new status column as well. And what are our statuses? Let's have a quick look. Over here, I've got my existing statuses are requested. Oops, let's just pull this across here. So this is requested, approval granted, purchased, received, request rejected, not purchased, not received, no, not purchased, no stock, not purchased, not budgeted item, and on hold. So let's go and put these in. Requested, approval granted, purchased, received, request rejected, and see over here the receive one. I might want to actually turn it dark green as well whilst I'm at it, so that this one turns red. Request rejected, and the next one is not purchased. There's also the not received one, which is a little bit dodgy. Does happen, but it could also be not purchased, no stock. Could be not purchased, not budgeted item, and the last one is on hold. So there's quite a few statuses there that you can enter and customize to your own liking. Not purchased, let's actually make this red. Let's make this really dark red. And then the no stock one, let's turn it yellow and turn that yellow as well. And that can turn a bit grayish. And again, quickly saving this. You can also, of course, go and add a few extra icons to it over here if you wanted to. And so we've demonstrated it in another video. Go to the column settings, go and format the column, edit the styles, and then here you can actually do more styles, and then you've got icons like that. Save it, go back, approval granted, let's actually give it a thumbs up, etc. Purchased, let's give it a up arrow or a rising arrow. Received, that's basically when it's all done and dusted. Let's do a big tick. And request rejected, not good, etc. So you can go and customize these as you wish. Now the next couple of columns there are going to be quite tricky ones. These are now our managed metadata columns. And so let's go and see what managed metadata is, simply by just coming into here, and we'll quickly go behind the scenes, and let's just go to the site information. Whoops, looks like it didn't load, but that's okay. Let's go to site info, view all site settings. And there's this thing here in the site administration section called the term store management. So we'll quickly take it over here as well. View all site settings. And if you can't find it initially, it's just do a quick search, term store management, and here it is. What does this do? Well, the managed metadata is a very, very special type of choice. So it's the usual choice columns in SharePoint only let you select up to about 10 to 12 before it gets a bit too tedious. Here, you can actually create your own set of terms, so to speak. So you'll notice here there are different terms that you can actually create. And so one of the applications of this is what are the class names for all of the maths classes at Norman Hurst Boys High School. And you can actually create a hierarchical set of terms there, year 7, and then you've got these 4 classes there for maths, etc. But then once it gets to year 11, you actually have all of these different class codes. And once you get to year 12, you've got a set of different class codes. And here for finance, we've created different cost centers. So your cost centers will obviously be a 6 with your school code. So our school code is 8211. And then 101, I think, is default the educational delivery one. I think most schools also have a default of 130 for English, maths, science, etc. So obviously, if you're primary, then your codes will be very different looking. You've also got, we've also put in some operating expenses there. And what we've got here are all these bits and pieces. And what we'll do is we'll land a link to an existing Excel file that you can simply upload and actually insert into your site so that you don't have to recreate all of these things from scratch. But within, let's say, for example, the teaching and learning section, you've got all of these very commonly used GL codes that you can insert so that when you come back into here, you can actually then quickly just simply select by clicking on that tag there, just simply select and then expand the appropriate section. Or if you've made a mistake, of course, then go and just pop the administration one open, for example. And if it's office supplies, then so be it. It's office supplies. So we'll do that. But in the meantime, what we can do is we can have a quick look at how it's done. So over here, we've got the site level term groups that you can go into. And you can actually then click on these 3 dots over here and then click on the import term set. So if you wanted to create your own, that's where you'd start. You'd probably do try to import it. Of course, you can also manually do it. You can go and add a term set like this, but that's going to be a very, very tedious process. So that's certainly not recommended, and you can add a term set there. So for example, some other term set, for example, and this then runs over here like that. And so we're just going to delete that because we don't want people playing around with it. And so as we open up one of these particular Excel files, the CSVs that you can grab out of here. So when you actually go and try to import a term set and you download the sample metadata.csv and then modify it, you can then actually see what's in there. So I've changed this one to finance. That's the term set name, the term set description, and here we've got cost center being the level 1 term, and then I actually haven't so the 8xxx there is actually a high school code, 8xxx, and so these are going to be your terms. So I'm just going to save this and let's see what happens as we import it. Browse for that selected file. Cost center, import it. And so it's now being successfully imported. So the finance is the root, cost center is then going to have all of these bits over here. And obviously you'd have your own school code there done properly. Let's have a quick look at the operating expenses CSV as well. So these are the typical operating expenses that are basically just extracted out of SAP. So you've got level 1, level 2, and level 3 terms. It's still called finance. Level 1 term is operating expenses. Level 2 term is here. And then the level 3 terms, there could be a number of level 3 terms for each level 2 term. And so let's actually go and import this as well. Need to click on these 3 dots here. Import term set. Browse the file. and it's the operating expenses one, and import it. Now, when you then import it, it'll go into Finance 1, which is not very convenient. So we want it to be under Finance. So how do we do that? Just click on the three dots next to operating expenses and move the term up. Go to all classes there and move it into Finance. So we can now go and delete this Finance 1 term set. And as you pop this one open, and as you keep popping these ones open, here you have your other insurances, which is 521433. And so what we're now ready to do is we're now ready to go and create two of these columns. So the first one here we're going to create is this new type called a managed metadata. We're going to call it a cost center. In fact, let me just quickly check what it's called in the other list. Yep, it's just called cost center. It's managed metadata, and the term set or the term is simply in here in the finance, and here we're going to click on cost center and save that. We're then going to go and create another column called the general ledger code, I think it is, general ledger code, yep. Oops, couldn't spell. And term set or the term is back into here, and it's actually still in finance, but it's actually the operating expenses. And so as you then go and select, you'll be presented with a choice to select everything under here, and in fact one further down. And save that there. You can actually set these to require a specific value as well, so I think I forgot about that one. Require that this has information, and of course we're going to require this next one to have some information as well. Let's go and play with it and let's see what happens. So we now have a cost center. We don't really know what it is, but let's just start typing in a 6, and lo and behold, here it is. So more often than not, if it's the mathematics faculty, you'll select mathematics, but sometimes you might actually be purchasing things underneath another cost center. And the general ledger code, really no one remembers any of these. So let's go into here, and I think we were purchasing some teaching resources. Or in fact, no, I think it was office supplies. Yeah, office supplies, so it's whiteboard markers. Let's click apply, and there it is. So there's a couple of last few columns that we still need, and that's the approval. So we've had the nominated purchaser. We now need to do the approved by. It's show profile photo. We don't require that this has information because that's going to be populated subsequently. And we also want an approval date time. We'll call it approval date, but we'll include the time anyway. We'll also want a mark as purchased column. It's a yes, no, but by default it's no. And we will require that this has information. And let's untick it as well. And the next one is purchaser, show profile photos, and we're not going to require it to have information to start off with again. The next type is mark as received, and again, yes, no. By default, it's no. We will require that. Oh, no, we don't require that this is information, do we? Yes, we do. And the default is let's untick it again. Bit of a strange one. You need to untick it, and then before you untick it, and this one here, we want it to have a receiver column. And one final one, we want a request ID because we're going to build a flow for this as well. This one, yes. No, we're not going to require that it has information yet because the flow is going to update this one for us. But what we will want is that this request ID should be unique. So in fact, let's just go and edit that. Keep forgetting. And so yes, no, it's this one. We want it to be unique. And the last one is another yes, no column, and it's the visible column. And default it's yes, and yes, we will require that it has information. And I think that's all the columns that we need for this to happen. And so let's actually go and format a few of these. Let's play with the URL column first, because this URL column at the moment, if you sort of try to click on it, it doesn't really work, does it? So let's actually go to column settings and play with some SharePoint formatting. And again, we're going to hit the advanced mode. And just like the last video, there's a couple of .json files here in the SharePoint list formatting for the purchase requests project there. And so we want to go to the url.json file, grab all of that code out. Basically, what it does is it looks at whether the current field has something in there, that is, whether it's actually got a URL. If it does, it applies a shopping cart icon, otherwise the icon disappears. And also, if there is something in the current field here, it then has this little piece of text that says click to visit item website, otherwise it leaves it blank. So let's just copy that and paste that all in. Save it, and it's turned into something else. There's a few other bits and pieces, of course, here. So let's go through these files here. The mark as purchased JSON. So we're going to play with this one as well. And again, what it does is it looks at whether that mark as purchase field is ticked or unticked. More often than not, it's unticked. So if you then tick it, this is then what happens, etc. So we've looked at this yes/no type column before in the previous video in the exam marking bundles. Press the button. If it's not been pressed before, then it will do something. Otherwise, it will do something else. And that's the if condition over here. And in fact, it will update 3 different columns. It will update markers purchased, the purchaser, status updates, and the status there. So let's actually go and paste that code in, which is in the markers purchased column, format it, advanced mode. Oops, let's copy that properly. Paste that in, save it, and then in the other one, I think it's markers received. Copy this stuff. And markers received basically does the same thing as markers purchased, except that it updates a slightly different column there, markers received. Advanced, paste that stuff in. Let's give it a spin. Look at that. There's a little shopping cart there. Press that button. The purchaser comes up. And in fact, if you then double click on it, have I done my status column? No, I haven't done my status column yet. So let's go and do that as well. Almost forgot about this very important column. Multiple lines of text, enhance rich text, and append. Whoops, no, I have done the status column. So where is it? Status, status, status. Here it is. No, it's not status. I'm sorry. Status updates. Sorry, status updates. Status updates. And let's try again. Enhance rich text. Append to existing. Tick that again, and view the entries. And here are my status updates, which is very nice. And let's just test out the markers received column as well whilst we're at it. And here it is. Okay, untick that as well. And it's been marked as received, unmarked and marked, etc. So this will be the end of the first part of the recording on the purchase request list, because in the next part we're going to then look at building the flows that are associated with this. So this first bit is really just to demonstrate the list construction and how some of these list items work. What we'll do is in the second part we'll build a little bit more